So excited. All right. Well, it's a minute after the hour, and we are so excited to be getting our baking on with all of you. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just so you all know, we are recording this meeting because there was a few folks who got tickets but couldn't be here. So, they're hoping to catch up on the recipe after. If you can put on your camera, we would love to see your beautiful faces. If you have a drink, please grab it and cheers. That would make it even more fun and interactive. But who am I? So, just a very quick introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Berenblatt, and I am the founder and CEO of Remake. As someone who really loves to bake with her 8 and 10-year-old, who are here, by the way, our ingredients are ready. I'm just so excited about our baking fundraiser event today. It's really wonderful to see a few familiar faces, but actually, even more exciting to see a lot of new faces to our movement. And so, for those unfamiliar with Remake, I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of who we are and why Elisa so kindly decided to support us as a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit based in San Francisco that's focused on making fashion a force for good. We do that in three ways. The first is we provide free educational resources in high schools, in colleges, in clubs, just to get everyday citizens to wear their values. That's our slogan. As you see, we have our tees on. And it's really to get people to understand the connection between women's rights, climate change, and fashion, and for you to really be able to be a part of the movement. Beyond our education resources, we're really focused on transparency. The first question we get once people understand, all the issues connected to fashion are often, well, where do I buy? And so on our platform, remake.world, we have a searchable directory where you can have a better understanding of who are the worst brands, who are the better brands, and really boycott and boycott as you like. And finally, we really focus on advocacy. This is about mobilizing our 800 plus volunteer community of ambassadors to hold the fashion industry accountable, to get them to respect people and the planet, and to pass smart regulation. So those are the three areas of Remake. And as I look at this crazy 14 months that we've had, the pandemic has really been such a reflective time for all of us. I think for many of us, we can say we've really honed in on what really matters. We've questioned where we spend our time, what we should buy, what we shouldn't buy, and who we should be spending our time with. And so, really building on this reflection, starting June 1, our Remake community is going to be taking the No New Clothes Challenge. For 90 days, our entire community worldwide is going to unsubscribe from all fashion emails and buy nothing. It's a time for us to repair and recycle, mend what we own, and really think and reflect about the destructive side of fashion. Which brings us really to today. So many of us who work in fashion understand the connection between food and fashion, what we put inside our body and what we put on our body. And so when the incredible Elisa Marshall said yes, to headlining today's fundraiser, I was just so excited and thrilled because, so much of what Elisa is all about is about rediscovering the art of making and baking, about creating a process of what we put in our body and creating beauty and community when we come together. And so I wanted to go ahead without further ado and first thank her for donating her time. Thank you all for donating the ticket sales, all of which will go to Remake's movement building work today, and to introduce you to Elisa Marshall. So she is the lovely lady, at least on my screen to the right, the founding partner and creative director of Maman. I have myself visited the incredible space in Manhattan, but they also have storefronts in Brooklyn and in Toronto, and soon a new store coming to the Upper East Side. So for those of you on the East Coast, as things are opening up, please go, please visit. It's an incredible place of coming together in community and having delicious food. I am personally a huge fan of her nutty chocolate chip cookies, which I believe Oprah is a huge fan of as well. I know Amelia and some of my team members are really excited about the lavender waffles with mascarpone, vanilla. I mean, what's there not to like? And, we are really excited to share that Elisa is going to actually be releasing a cookbook coming September 14th. And two of you, as lucky raffle winners, will be getting that cookbook as part of the prizes today. We're also going to put the pre order link in the chat. And so it's a way for you to support her creations if you fall in love with what we're going to make today, which I know you absolutely will. And so, without further ado, I wanted to turn you over to Elisa's very capable hands. I have all my baking ingredients here. I'm going to be baking with my 10-year-old today. Please keep the questions coming. We want this to be interactive. And let's get going in making s'more cookie bars. Elisa, over to you.
Amazing. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining and for being part of this with us. That was such a lovely, wonderful intro. I feel like I don't have too much else to say. You covered it all, and thank you so much for having me. First of all, my past experience, my past life, I sometimes like to say, lies in fashion. So everything that you guys are doing at Remake is very inspiring for me, and I couldn't not say yes to this awesome opportunity. And this is even more exciting for me because this recipe today that we're doing is actually the first live recipe that I'm going to be showing you guys how to make from our book. So it's the first time ever we're kind of releasing a sneak peek of the book. So as you guys all know, we are going to be making our delicious s'mores cookie bars. So I have all these fun pages because I myself don't even actually have a book yet. This is our beautiful working documents that I've been working off of, just tons and tons and piles of pages that we make notes on and make edits on. So it's been a very fun process. It's been over 2 years in the making. And we are so excited to finally have it come to life and available for you guys. So it's something that's on pre-order now. And as Aisha said, coming out September 14th. So the recipe of choice tonight, as you guys all know, is going to be our s'mores cookie bar. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about this recipe. I'm going to show you up and close the beautiful photo. So that's hopefully what yours will look like at the end of the night with a few beautiful sprinkles added on top. But what we are going to be kind of going through tonight is just kind of some of the basic baking principles. I'm going to do a demo on, A to Z, how to make these bars. And then as I go, I really want to make sure that I'm engaging with you guys. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to shout them out. Aisha, I'm a little far from the screen right now, so you can kind of see the full workspace. So even if you want to interrupt me and speak up at any time, because it's kind of hard to read the chat, but I do definitely really want to make this interactive. So any questions you guys have, please feel free to type them in the chat as we go. So the s'mores cookie bar. So this is one of our classic cookies, our s'mores cookie. And to be honest, when we were writing the book, it was so cookie heavy. And we're like, we need to do something different. We need to switch it up. We can't have, 20 different cookie recipes in the book. It's getting a little boring. And I personally really love bars. Sometimes I feel like a whole cookie, I'm obligated to eat the entire thing. And when you get a full cookie, it's tough to kind of portion it out. So I find with the bars, not only is it something unique, it's much easier to make than the cookies, as you guys are going to learn, but it's also easier to enjoy because you can just kind of chop off pieces as you go and take a little bites when the craving hits. Also really great to freeze. These guys are super moist, so they do keep covered airtight for about a week, but they probably won't last that long in your house if yours is anything like mine. So I'm going to be actually making the recipe with you guys because I encourage you to hopefully do the same. So it's not going to be your typical quick cookie show demo that you are used to seeing because I want to give everybody an opportunity to measure up ingredients as we go. So I'm going to try and do it step by step as much as possible. So if we all have all of our items ready, I'm going to get started. You all have the recipes in front of you, but I will verbalize everything as we go throughout. So the first step and the obvious step is going to be preheating the oven. So we are going to be preheating the oven to 350 degrees. And ultimately, when we start baking, the easiest thing to do is prepping the pan and prepping the container and vessel you're going to be making it in, putting it aside and getting that out of the way. So our friends at Great Jones, who we just adore, for those of you who don't know Great Jones, they are a local New York City-based, beautiful line of dishware and servingware and bakingware, and they're just so fun. It's a really great fusion of fashion meets baking, which we all love so much. So we are going to start by prepping our pan. So I'm going to explain to you guys two options. You'll see in the book, and it's a little bit of a traditional method, utilizing parchment paper to line it. So parchment paper is great to line a lot of our baking surfaces. I'm going to show you a little cheat and a trick on getting perfect parchment paper for the size of your pan. So what I love to do is always lay down my parchment paper. I'm going to take whatever vessel I'm baking in. This is a 9x13 glass pan. And I'm simply going to trace out lines, or you can even, if you forgot your pen like I did, you can use your nails and make creases in the paper. And then that's great because it gives you some cut lines. And then in addition to that, I'm going to leave about 3 or 4 inches on either side to allow for flaps to stick up at the side, because with bars and items like this, it's super easy to kind of grab at the end and entirely pull out. Now, one thing I do want to mention, because this is a wax coated paper, it is unfortunately not recyclable. So we want to do what we can for the environment. I'm going to save this for something else where I really need it. And I am going to just use a classic baking spray. So I love the classic Pam oil baking spray. You guys can use butter and flour however you prefer. I wanted to show you the method of parchment paper, but just because it's something non-recyclable, I do want to opt with just my baking spray tonight. So I have a small child, and hardwood floor, so I like to do it over the sink, because I find if you just spray it in the air, it tends to get all over the floor and it can get very slippery. So once we prep our pan, we're going to put this aside. Don't forget, I hope you all preheated your oven to 350 as well. And now we are ready for the fun part. So we're going to break this down kind of into like 4 or 5 steps. We are going to start with the first step, which is going to be the dry ingredients. So our dry ingredients tonight, we are using a classic all-purpose flour. I'm going to be using some baking powder. I have some extra fine sea salt. And I also have some graham crackers, so just traditional graham crackers. So we all know and love the classic s'mores, and this is such great season for s'mores as well, since we're in prime launching into spring for campfire time. So this is a really fun take on the traditional s'mores. And also what I love about this is you get all the flavor of the s'more, but it's just not as messy. So we are going to get a medium-sized mixing bowl. Now,
Elisa, I have a question.
Of course.
I'm using gluten-free flour. Will that impact the recipe at all?
That's a good question. I am not using gluten-free flour. You definitely can. Depending on the flour that you purchase, you could use a combination of gluten-free all-purpose flour with almond flour, and that I know is also a nice option. The almond flour does tend to add a little bit of additional moisture to it as well and not make it as dry, especially when using that. But if you do opt for gluten-free flour, depending on which type it is, it'll all have the ingredients on the proper substitution. So that's really specific depending on the brand that you're using. But definitely this is for sure an easy option to make gluten-free. And I know there are some people out there who have bought tickets who are gluten-free as well, who are doing this option.
Thank you.
Of course. When measuring flour, I like to use a spoon to avoid messes and loosen it up, and I'm going to measure it directly into my cup. So unlike cooking, baking is a little bit more about precision. So we do want to make sure that we pay attention to the baking measurements, making sure they're exact. Oh, and I should tell you, we are doing 1.5 cups of flour. So I have my heaping spoon of flour. I'm going to lightly press it down with the back of a knife. And I'm going to scrape it off. So we have one perfect level cup of flour. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my half cup. So we're going to scoop it in. I just find the scooping makes it a little bit less messier than digging your hand into the bag. Great. Perfect. So 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour or gluten-free flour of your choice. And if there are any additions in using gluten-free flour and they are part of the dry ingredients, now's the time to do it as well. So next we are going to be adding in 1/2 teaspoon of extra fine sea salt. I like extra fine just specifically in this recipe so it doesn't have too much granulation and too many chunks in it. And then finally, we are going to be using 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Now, for those of you who are not avid bakers, what a lot of people don't really realize is that baking powder does actually have an expiry date. So if you're pulling out a jar that's been in the back of your pantry for over a year, you really want to make sure that you're checking that it's active, because you're going to spend all this time and effort making something beautiful and it's not going to turn out. So if you are not an avid baker and don't go through baking powder like I do, a quick, great test to make sure that it is still active is a cup or so of hot water and a teaspoon of baking powder. So you want to make sure that the baking powder immediately dissolves in the hot water. And if it doesn't, if it clumps, if it sits on the top, your baking powder is no longer active. So that's just a quick little way if it's been sitting there for too long. I mean, tonight we're just going to use what you got and hope for the best, but for future. So I have added in my baking powder. I'm just going to stir it up with a whisk, making sure everything is really well incorporated. Now comes the graham crackers. So I'm using about 6. Another thing, if you are going gluten-free for this recipe, you're going to want to source gluten-free graham crackers, or unfortunately, you can kind of skip these altogether if you do have problems finding them. If anyone out there is doing a gluten-free version of this and you were able to source gluten-free crackers, it would be great to share with us any brands or any tips and tricks on that. So we're going to be doing 6 full crackers. We want to cut these into about inch pieces and add them to the bowl. Actually, sorry, 1/2 inch pieces. And I'm just actually going to crush them up by hand because I find that easier. Sometimes with a knife, they tend to really crumble a little bit too much. And you want to make sure that in the bar, you have those nice crispy chunks of graham crackers. So I have 3 at a time that I'm doing and just kind of mushing them up between my fingers. All right, now you can put these, I actually, when I did this recipe, I did a few different variations. And, you know, when you're doing a book, you're recipe testing for a long time and you know, trying this same recipe about 6 or 7 times using different tweaks. Now, I found that the graham crackers, when adding them to the dry ingredients and coating them in the flour, tend to stay crispier in the bar itself as opposed to adding them to the wet ingredients, because you know, they ultimately are a cracker and they just tend to absorb the wet ingredients. But I felt like coated in flour, it kind of prevented it from doing so, and it helped them retain their texture within the bar. So again, once we have our crackers, we're just going to kind of mix it all up within our flour, baking powder, and salt mixture, making sure they're all nicely coated. And you have a variety of nice big chunks in there, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. And then you can take that bowl and put it aside. All right. So now we are on to the wet ingredients. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm so sorry. I do. I'm probably the only one that has this problem. Graham cracker crumbs is all I have. Do you have like a rough volume equivalent for 6 graham crackers?
Great idea. So I would add in, we want to make sure it is part of the dry ingredients. I would do half a cup.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. Perfect. So now we're going to move on to the wet ingredients. So our first wet ingredient is going to be 2 sticks of butter. Now, I hope all of you guys pre-softened your butter in advance, leaving it at room temperature, because that's always what you want to do when mixing it with sugar and baking. If you didn't, I have a fun little tip and trick for you. So I just pulled out of the fridge a cold block of butter for those of you who forgot to do it. So this is a cheat that my mom taught me, actually, that is really great if you did forget to do it. I find if you throw it in the microwave or you try to liquefy it too quickly with any form of heat, it can really throw off the entire texture of your dough and ruin the recipe. So simply take your cold stick of butter and you're going to grate it like you would cheese. And you're just going to run it over your cheese grater, just like so. It's going to come out into these beautiful cheesy strings. And then you can utilize that within your stand mixer, your hand mixer, to act as softened butter. So fortunately, I remembered to pre-soften my butter. So I'm going to start and add 2 sticks of room temperature butter in here. And so I'm doing this backwards so you guys can see. And then we're gonna put the mixer on low to kind of soften it up and make a little bit of a funnel to add in the next ingredients. So next we are going to turn to our sugar. Now, I am using a combination of granulated white sugar along with brown sugar in this recipe. So what is the difference? Many of you may wonder. Ultimately, the sweetness level of the two are the same. One is more refined than the other, being the white sugar. However, the only real difference between the two is brown sugar has added molasses in it. So it is a much softer, it has a lot more moisture in it, and it really tends to affect the quality of the cookies. If you like a crispier, thinner, crunchier cookie, you could opt for all of the granulated sugar, but I find the mix of the two, again, I told you after testing this recipe 15 times with many different variations of sugar, I really like the way that this one turned out using the combination of the two. If you don't have both, no problem. Another easy, quick fix for those of you who have a well-stocked pantry is to create your own brown sugar by using white sugar, granulated sugar, and molasses. So this recipe is going to call for 3/4 of a cup of white sugar and 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And for the brown sugar, we are actually going to be doing this packed. So important to read in recipes whether or not it states that it's packed brown sugar or not packed, because that really can tend to affect the level of sweetness. So I'm just going to pack it down with my finger to make sure I have a good amount. Perfect, 3/4 cup here. Now, if you guys have brown sugar that has also been sitting in your pantry for a while, such a coincidence for tonight, because we are baking with sugar and marshmallows, but a great cheat for you to make sure that your brown sugar doesn't clump or harden if sitting too long is adding marshmallows to it. So you can actually use 2 or 3 full marshmallows. I think the full ones would probably be best with the brown sugar as opposed to the smaller ones we're using tonight. But that helps to keep the moisture in, as does bread. So a full piece, half a piece of just plain white bread you can keep in your brown sugar. I'm sure you guys have also seen some of those terracotta brown sugar bears as well, or different shapes that you can buy at various baking stores. So those are always great. I find with, the humidity, with heat, with air, it's really important to keep it in an airtight container. But then in addition to that, having something else that really helps to retain the moisture in the sugar so you don't open it up and it's a complete hard clump of sugar. So I am going to mix this on, I would say medium, for a few minutes until it is fully, till the sugar ultimately is dissolved. And you guys can scrape down the sides as well, making sure we're catching all of it. So you want to just kind of make sure that you're not seeing any of the brown sugar at this point. Now's a good time to pour yourself a drink and have a sip. So once it's a little bit more creamed and fluffy, I'm going to drop the speed down, and I'm actually adding in my 3/4 of a teaspoon of vanilla. So vanilla extract is great to use here. I actually prefer using vanilla bean paste. I find it's actually made with vanilla bean scraping, so it does have a little bit of a stronger vanilla flavor to it.
Elisa, where do you get vanilla bean paste?
At any baking specialty stores, I'd say. It's not the kind of thing you typically find in your grocery stores. You can also use scrapings of a vanilla bean as well. I find, typically in grocery stores, you'll find either full vanilla beans within the spice section, or you'll find the extract. But the paste is a little bit more unique, and I feel like that's probably something a little bit more readily available at specialty baking stores. So once it is creamed and fluffy and it's pretty transparent, you don't see too much of the granulated brown sugar in it anymore, we are good to add our eggs. So any questions through here? Everyone's kind of up to speed and all good? All right. On to the eggs. So we are adding in 2 large eggs, and we're going to be doing this one at a time. You want to make sure that once you add 1 egg, you put your beater on and wait until it's fully dissolved within your mixture before you add in the second one. So crack on the side of the bowl.
Aisha is asking if you love your KitchenAid and if you suggest buying that for baking. I love mine.
I absolutely love this mixer. This one specifically is the Pro Line series, just because I feel like I'm using it consistently all the time, and it actually has a higher speed on it. I also love the glass bowl that it comes in, as opposed to the metal bowls, but the metal bowls are also really great to keep refrigerated as well, to keep batters and doughs cold. And there's tons of attachments. You can make juice from these, you can make ice cream. I just feel like it is probably one of the most versatile kitchen appliances that I have. And I leave it out sitting on my kitchen counter at all times. It's probably also the most used kitchen appliance that I have as well. So we're going to want to beat the egg until we no longer see it, ensuring that we're scraping down the bowl as well. This one as well, it might be difficult for you guys to see, but there's a few different attachments that come with it. So typically there's the whisk attachment and the paddle attachment. This was one upgraded attachment that I got, and it's a paddle attachment, but on the side of it, it actually has like a rubber spatula corner. So as it goes, it really tends to scrape the bowl as opposed to just moving things around. So it has kind of a soft rubber spatula-ish side on this particular one. All right, on to number 2.
Elisa, I had a question about the eggs.
Yes.
So in some recipes I've read that it's really important to have the eggs like room temperature or warm and not cold. Is that like, does the same thing go for every recipe, or is it only specific things?
You know, I find having them, you really want to gauge with the recipes. That's something that's super technical. To be transparent, I haven't seen too much of a difference in baking items like this. I think when you get into more fine pastries and bread and more very intricate pastries, it will make a difference. I usually tend to utilize them room temperature because ultimately, you know, I take them out of the fridge, I'll prep them. You know, when I start prepping the pan, they tend to sit. They ultimately will, you know, warm up naturally within the batter, especially if my other ingredients are room temperature. So just think about what the other ingredients are. If I was saying use like cold chilled butter for this recipe, I would definitely make sure that my eggs were also cold and chilled, because obviously you want to ensure that this batter is kept at a specific temperature. But you can really play with the recipe, but I'd say like room temperature, you know, for something like this, cookies, it doesn't make a huge difference. You guys wouldn't be able to make 2 batches with the cold eggs and non-cold eggs and be able to tell the difference.
Okay. Thank you.
I love that you guys are asking questions. It makes it so much more interesting for me and easier. All right. So at this point, we're going to have a nice consistency of a delicious buttery, sugary egg mixture here. Great, and now it is time to add in our dry mixes. So as opposed to throwing this all in at once and having a huge flour explosion, I like to do this bit by bit, usually in about 2 to 3 different parts, just to make sure it all gets fully incorporated. So to avoid a mess, I'm using my same measuring spoon to add in the dry ingredients. And also, if your crackers are a little bit finer, you'll find that it's naturally just going to break them up even more. Sorry, if your crackers were a bit larger, it's going to break them up even more in the whisk. And again, I will just add in the remaining. So you want to mix this until you no longer see any flour and you have a nice dough consistency. And again, take a little pause and scrape it down to make sure that it's fully incorporated. All right, good. So now I'm going to lower the bowl and I'm going to let this run a few times to kind of shake off the excess dough on the beater. Okay, we'll pop this guy off of here. Scrape it off a little so I can show you. There we go. So you can see here, this is the edge that I'm talking about, which is the little plastic side as well. So if you are an avid baker or want to become an avid baker, I really suggest if you do opt to get a KitchenAid, you get one of these side scraper attachments. So I'll put that aside for now. So now the fun s'mores part. So this is what everyone's batter should look like. If it's runnier than this, we have a problem.
We have a quick question from Kate. She's asking, she's a little behind and she's wondering how much we should mix the cracker flour mixture in right now. So what speed and until what consistency?
Oh, for sure. So we're just going to be adding it in 2 parts. And you could just do it kind of on medium speed for about a minute, just until you no longer see flour. I'll show you guys again, kind of, it's like a nice, you know, you don't see any powder, you don't see any streaks of white throughout there. And you can always kind of mix it with your hand as well in the end to make sure. I always like to take it out of the mixer and sometimes give it a few good folds to make sure that there's no little puddle of flour or egg or any stray ingredient in that bottom center crevice that sometimes the mixer tends to miss. And now we are going to add in the baking wafers, and we're going to do half of the marshmallows. So the recipe called for 1 cup of marshmallows. You guys are at this point going to want to divide the marshmallows into 2 half cups. Half of the marshmallows are going to be going into the batter. So this helps to really create a nice, soft, gooey texture and consistency in the batter. And the other half we're going to save to put on the top. And then we're going to be using our baking wafers. So we're going to be folding in 1 cup of baking wafers. So
Lisa,
yes.
question. Is there like a difference between wafers or just chocolate chips, or are they this pretty similar?
No, that's a great question. So the reason this specific recipe called for 2 different kinds of chocolate. So baking wafers actually have more cocoa butter in them and tends to make them softer. So if you want something that has that really ooey gooey stringy chocolate center to it, or if you're going to be doing a fondue-esque, you know, strawberries dipped in chocolate, or if you're going to be doing cookies that are dipped in chocolate, you want to opt for wafers. Wafers melt better than anything else out there. This specific recipe, I like the gooiness of the chocolate on the inside, yet I do still love the texture. So that is why in this recipe with the s'mores bars, I have done a combination of the 2. We are going to be putting the chopped up chocolate on the top. The traditional chocolate bars, chocolate chips tend to hold their shape much better. They're not going to melt and get gooey cookies. So when you guys, you know, when you come to Maman and you have a cookie there, you're going to see that it's a really nice, soft cookie, and it'll kind of have those chocolate strings when you pull it apart. We use the Guittard baking wafers for those. So of course, for those of you who couldn't find baking wafers, again, sometimes it's a little bit more of a specialty item. 100% you can use chocolate chips here. You can get your favorite chocolate bar and chop it up as well. That totally works.
I got a question.
Yes.
Sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say about the chocolate. I specifically like using a darker chocolate just because the flavor tends to punch a little bit more than using a milk chocolate, which the sweetness kind of overpowers. And so
I just got a large marshmallow. How can I, like,
Ooh.
Is that okay or?
That is fine. What I would do actually, I would start ripping those into pieces. I think you're gonna not have fun cutting them up. So the best way to do it is gonna be using your fingers. If we use the large marshmallows in the batter right now, I feel like you're just gonna get a huge chunky marshmallow piece into the cookie. So that's why having it smaller. So for those of you who did get the big ones, no problem. I think your nails are gonna be much better and easier than a knife. It's gonna stick a little bit too much. You might wanna also dip your fingers in some flour prior to doing that, because they can tend to be sticky and it'll just make it easier for you to pull them apart.
All right, thank you.
Of course. So we have half a cup of marshmallows, which I'm now gonna add in. And folding, ultimately, I'm using my spatula. You're really just turning one hand at a time and folding the batter over one another until it's fully mixed together. And I will give you guys a little sneak preview of the dough here. So you want to make sure it's a nice stiff consistency of the dough and not too runny. Especially when making cookie recipes into bars, you don't want it to be too liquidy of a dough. So if you guys have a favorite cookie recipe that you would love to try to turn it into a bar, usually the ones that are a little bit denser in texture are better, just because the cooking, you want to make sure it's evenly. They're not getting cooked fully around like a traditional cookie would. So if it is too liquidy, the center is not going to bake and the outsides are going to bake. Whereas if it is a dough that is a little bit more dense like this one, and if it's something that's going to be malleable with your hands, that's a great kind of cookie to opt to use into a bar. Cool. So now we have our delicious s'mores batter. So we're going to get our prepared baking pan.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
So is it a half a cup of marshmallows or a full cup?
Half a cup of marshmallows. So we've reserved the half a cup because what we're going to do is once we put these in the oven, we're going to cook it for about 20 to 25 minutes. We're going to take it out of the oven. We're going to line the top of it with marshmallows. Did I even show you guys mine? They're right here in front of me. I've been salivating the whole time and I don't even think I showed you. I just showed you the picture. So then we're going to add in the marshmallows after, put it back in the oven and cook it for another 8 to 10 minutes with marshmallows and chocolate. So you get that nice, gooey, beautiful toasted marshmallow effect on the top. Whereas if we were to do it now, cooking it for 30 minutes, the marshmallows would just burn immediately because they have such a high sugar content. So that's why we're reserving the chopped chocolate and we're reserving half a cup of marshmallows for the topping later. So now we are simply going to put our dough into the pan. So it should pretty much fall out there nicely. And using your fingers or using a spatula, you're going to smooth it out into the pan. So anytime you want to use a cookie recipe to turn into a cookie bar, as mentioned, you want to make sure it's dense and you never really want to go more than, I would say, 3/4 of an inch to an inch in height. So make sure that your pan is proportionate. And that is just to ensure baking consistency as well. If it's too thick, it's going to bake too quickly around the outside. So you really want to just kind of go through and spread it, making sure it's smooth and it is not higher on one side with more dough and lower on another. There you go. And now this is then going to go into the oven. As mentioned prior, it is going to go in for about 20 to 25 minutes at 350. You want to start seeing the edges browning and the middle will still be a little bit soft. So at that time, you're going to want to remove it from the oven. And let's pretend with my magic kitchen, I just did that. And now you're going to sprinkle the remaining marshmallows on top. And you're going to want to sprinkle. I tend to like to spread them out a little bit because if you overdo it on the marshmallows or if they're too close together, what happens with them as they cook is they expand and then they'll all kind of like find each other and cling together and it'll just be a big white topping on your bar. So to make sure it looks beautiful in the end, which is equally as important as how delicious it tastes, you want to spread them out so they don't kind of all cling together and turn into one big white blob. And then we're going to sprinkle the chocolate on top. So this, as mentioned, can be chopped chocolate, can be chocolate chips. It can even be the baking wafers. Same principle, if we are using the wafers on the top, is that it's going to melt and it's going to kind of turn into a smoother coat, whereas the chocolates will kind of give you that more visual effect and it won't lose its shape as much. So now after we've done this, it'll then go back into the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. This is something that you want to watch. The times really will give you a perfectly cooked bar and will give you perfectly cooked marshmallows as well. So being a little bit golden brown on the top is obviously the perfect look and taste for the marshmallows. And lastly, if there's any celebrations or just to make things extra beautiful, I love to put sprinkles on everything. And the amazing team at Remake actually introduced me to an incredible company that I just found out about called Supernatural. So I highly suggest you guys all check them out. I know we're doing a giveaway of them as part of the Raffle Prizes as well, but these are the most beautiful unicorn tracks are these ones that I use. So these are gorgeous sprinkles that are soy-free, no artificial dyes. They're vegan, no palm oil, and they're using all natural, real food ingredients to dye them. So for example, these ones are dyed with beets. They're dyed with purple potatoes. Really beautiful, super fun, vibrant colors. And you know you're putting good things into your body as opposed to all these artificial dyes. So when adding sprinkles, I wouldn't put these in and put them in the oven. I would wait until your bars are ready. As soon as it comes out of the oven and it's still hot and those marshmallows are still gooey, that is when you want to put the sprinkles on, because they'll really help to stick to the bar and make sure that they're not falling off with every different bite. So ultimately, I kind of overdosed on the marshmallows here because I do love marshmallows. But you can see here, you can cut them really into any different size that you guys like. Play with different colors of sprinkles, and they make the most delicious snack for when that sweet tooth hits. And here is the beautiful, more styled photo where we spread out the marshmallows as opposed to my blobs of marshmallows. You can see the difference here. So that pretty much sums it all up for me for tonight. And I would love to have you guys ask any more questions if there are any more.
Is this yours? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, Elisa, I think you're incredible at teaching, and I am a terrible baker by trade, and I think I may have actually excelled. So I'm pretty excited.
I want to see all these pictures on Instagram after to see who actually is a wonderful baker. But thank you so much for saying that. This is kind of those like you can't
Yeah.
too much recipes.
I was just wondering, can these be frozen?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Freeze them in an airtight container. They last in the freezer probably up to 3 months.
Lisa, yours looks so beautiful. Mine in the oven, it smells good. I'm just curious, how did you get into baking? Just sort of, you know, I know you do this with your sister, and it's something that gives you a lot of joy. Be fun
for sure. Well, actually, Maman, for those of you who don't know, means mother in French. So I really owe a lot to her. She was having some technical difficulties getting into Zoom. So I don't know if she's actually here. I hope she is. But I have to, give her all the credit for my love for baking. It was something that she grew up doing with her mother, and of course passed on the passion to myself as well. And we've been carrying on family recipes for quite some time. I never was professionally taught, and I learned everything I know from her and from practice and trial and error and watching, reruns of Martha Stewart. And I just really have a passion for it. And at one point as mentioned, I was working in the fashion industry, which kind of led me into events. I was doing PR marketing with a few different fashion brands. And I fell into events, and from events, I started doing a lot of wedding planning, event planning. I was working with various caterers, and they were asking for really specific things that I couldn't seem to find through various caterers. And I knew I had these recipes, I could make these items. So I just really started baking on the side. And I was at a point where I had so many different passions. I was doing a 9-to-5 in fashion. I was doing event planning on the side. I was baking and catering to friends and family. And in my mind, I thought, what am I going to do when I grow up? And how am I going to do something that I wake up and love doing every day? So I was able to kind of create this world for myself where I put all my passions together under one roof. And I was able to really fuel my love for baking. And I can't take credit for Maman's recipes. We have a way more experienced, incredible pastry chef who is doing all of the non-homemade, home-baked style things, plus more croissants. He's coming up with a lot of the great cookie recipes that we have. And he's really the whiz and brains behind it. But I also have such a passion for it and fun in the kitchen. And it's what I love doing. So And that's really, I was fortunate I was able to kind of like transpire that with many other things and turn it into a career.
Oh, that's amazing. So much of us here at Remake, it's a for women by women movement. It's about us really unleashing all possibilities. And you've just brought so much joy to everyone today. I think you could hear us clapping, but maybe we can at least put the emojis up. You just taught us with it was so fun and so interactive. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining. It was a pleasure to be here, and you give me excuses to get back in the kitchen and bake among my crazy life. And I hope you guys all carve out time to do what you love and get in the kitchen as well and play and experiment for recipes. It's, it's very, calming and almost, it's a fun experience, especially now when you get to share it with other people and you get to have people invited into your own kitchen doing it, thanks to the wonders of Zoom and COVID. So
exactly. We feel like we're in
my home.
But with that, I want to turn it over to Amelia for the fun part, which is our wonderful raffle prizes, because we have some very fun things lined up. So Amelia, over to you, and thank you so much, Elisa.
Yes, thank you so much, Elisa. That was so super interesting, and I cannot wait to make this with my niece and my nephews. They are going to love it. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Your donation is so important to help build a more just and accountable fashion industry. And I just want to give you, before we get into prizes, I just want to give you a little bit of info on where your ticket money goes tonight. So first of all, it goes to train our 800 wonderful ambassadors to be advocates for gender and climate justice, to our brand research to find out who the best brands are and who the other brands are that we can engage in dialogue with to help them improve their practices, to our advocacy efforts to improve the pay and working conditions of garment makers, like the Pay Up Fashion campaign that we created, and to help pass legislation like Senate Bill 62 in California, which will lift garment workers in LA to minimum wage status. So as you can see, your donations are meaningful in many different ways. So if you have not yet given, or you're able to give more, please go to our website, remake.world, and donate. And now, to thank you for your support, we have the fun prizes to give away. So first of all, we have 2 exclusive Wear Your Values totes, and Elisa and Aisha are wearing their shirts. This is our slogan. You can use the tote to show your solidarity with our movement. If everybody that bought a ticket tonight is entered in this raffle. So congratulations to Chris Rasmussen. And one more. Congratulations to Emma Franking. So excited. Wave if you're out there, you guys. Next up, we have Mama the Cookbook, all-day recipes to warm your heart. This is going to be super special. Everybody is entered in this one. It goes to Jeanette Tang. Congratulations, Jeanette. And then now if you bought the raffle tickets, then you're entered in the rest of these special prizes. So we have 2 more Mama cookbooks. This one goes to Nancy Berenblatt. Congratulations, Nancy. And Christina Kastelich. Congratulations, Christina. Those are for the 2 cookbooks. And now we have the Supernatural sprinkle set Elisa was using. So this includes the colors unicorn, I think blue pop and pink. This goes to Tracy West. Congratulations, Tracy. And then we have 2 pans, 2 pans from Great Jones. First, we have the baking dish that Elisa was using. Congratulations, Lee Voss Knowles. And then we have a pie container, also from Great Jones. And this goes to Gina Livingston. Congratulations, Gina. And then now, last but not least, we have the super special one-on-one baking class with the amazing Elisa Marshall. And this is if you bought the ticket for $150, you are entered to win. So congratulations to Miriam Khan. That is going to be so amazing. So thank you again to all of our contributors, Supernatural Sprinkles, Great Jones, and of course, Elisa Marshall and Mama Cafe. We had so much fun tonight. This was really great. And thank you all again so much for purchasing a ticket. Your donations make our work possible, and you are helping to shape the future of fashion. So again, if you go to our website, remake.world, you'll find all sorts of information about our work. You'll find the searchable brand directory that Aisha mentioned earlier, where you can look up your favorite brands and see their store. And you'll also find the option to contribute. So thank you again, and have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.